How do you keep moving forward when it feels like a part of you died with the person you lost? It doesn't matter how many times we try to prepare ourselves for loss. When it finally arrives, everything changes. Time suddenly stops. The world around you keeps spinning. People continue with their lives, unaware that your reality has collapsed. You find yourself standing still, frozen in a moment that feels endless, trapped in an emotional void, one that no one else seems to fully understand. Words of comfort, no matter how well-intentioned, seem empty. They don't make the pain go away. They don't quiet the aching silence inside. Something within you is screaming, without making a sound, begging for answers, for relief, for understanding. Death has always been the greatest mystery known to humankind. Since the dawn of time, it has frightened us. It wounds us. It strips us of our sense of control. And yet, paradoxically, it is the only certainty we are given in this life. It is the only thing we all must face. But what if I told you that loss, no matter how devastating, is not just an end? What if it's also the beginning of something else? Something new? Carl Jung, the father of deep psychology, understood something that many of us still struggle to grasp. He believed that death doesn't only transform the one who dies, it transforms the ones who are left behind. Because when we lose someone we love, we're not just mourning their absence, we're mourning a version of ourselves that will never return. Loss forces us to look inward, to confront questions we never wanted to ask. It pushes us to search for meaning in the chaos. It shakes the very foundation of our identity. Every goodbye holds within it an uncomfortable truth. Grief isn't only about the other person, it's about us. It's about who we were with them and who we are without them. And this is where Jung offers us a radically different perspective. He invites us to dive deep beneath the surface, into the hidden layers of our psyche. At the core of our unconscious mind lies something ancient, something universal, a pattern that connects every human being who has ever suffered a loss. Jung called it the collective unconscious. It's a shared reservoir of symbols, emotions, and meanings, a psychological network that transcends time, culture, and language. And within this vast landscape, there exists a powerful and primal image, the archetype of death. Throughout history, across every civilization and belief system, death has never simply been an end. It's been portrayed as a force of transformation. In ancient Egypt, it was the gateway to eternal life. In Buddhism, death marks the passage into another cycle of existence. Even in our dreams and myths, death often appears not as a final curtain, but as a threshold, a passage that opens the door to something new. And in the human mind, this metaphor lives on. The loss of someone we love initiates a deeply personal transformation. It's a process that tears us apart, but in doing so, it invites us to rebuild ourselves from the ashes. We emerge changed, not healed necessarily, but transformed. And that transformation can reveal depths within us we never knew existed. But here's the hard part. How do we find meaning in the midst of pain? How do you search for light when all you can see is darkness? How do you turn heartbreak into growth instead of letting it turn into a life sentence of suffering? That's the journey we're going to take together. In this video, we'll explore how to face the loss of a loved one through the lens of Carl Jung's deep psychology, not with resignation, but with understanding, not by forgetting, but by integrating that loss into the very fabric of who we are becoming. Because even if today your life feels meaningless, even if you're consumed by the unbearable weight of grief. There is a path, one that leads not only out of the pain, but into a deeper version of yourself. And it all begins by understanding the true meaning of grief, not just as an emotional reaction, but as a psychological transformation, one that touches the soul. In the next section, we'll uncover why death leaves such a profound imprint on the human psyche. We'll explore how the archetype of death influences our deepest emotions, often without us even realizing it. Because it's only by confronting this internal mythology, this unconscious narrative, that we can begin to turn our pain into something far more powerful than suffering. Death terrifies us. It forces us to face the unknown, the irreversible. It shatters our illusions of permanence. But ask yourself this: are we truly afraid of death itself? Or is it the idea of disappearing that really haunts us? Is it the thought of no longer existing, of being forgotten, of becoming nothing? That question is not just philosophical, it's deeply personal. And the way we answer it determines how we grieve, how we live, and ultimately, how we heal. Carl Jung understood it perfectly. Death is not just a biological event. It's a universal archetype, a primal image rooted in the collective unconscious, one that has shaped the way humanity experiences grief across time. From ancient civilizations to our modern era, death has taken on many forms and meanings. But there is one thing all interpretations have in common: its psychological impact is inescapable. And yet, why is it so hard for us to accept it? The answer is simple, though deeply uncomfortable. We live under the illusion of permanence. We convince ourselves that time is endless, that people will always be there, that we'll have all the time in the world to say what we feel, to do what we dream. Until one day, that person is gone, and reality hits like a tidal wave. We are finite. The ego, that part of us that believes it has control over everything, cannot accept this truth. It resists. It clings. Because to accept death is to accept that everything we've built, everything we love, everything we believe ourselves to be, will eventually vanish. That's why grief hurts so much. Because it's not just about losing someone else. It's about confronting our own mortality. And this is where myths, rituals, and beliefs come in. These are the tools we've created over the centuries to cope with an unbearable truth. The Egyptians built pyramids to ensure life after death. The Aztecs celebrated the Day of the Dead to honor their ancestors. Tibetan monks practiced death meditations, visualizing their own end to dissolve fear. Each culture, in its own way, developed paths to give meaning to the inevitable. But what do we have today? We live in a world that has stripped away the rituals, a society that tells us we must move on quickly, that grief must be buried, pain pushed aside, life resumed as if nothing happened. And here lies the real problem. When we ignore the deeper meaning of death, we rob ourselves of one of the most powerful teachings it can offer: the opportunity to look inward, to question our existence, to give our lives true meaning before it's too late. So how do we begin to face this? How can we accept death without being consumed by fear? How do we transform grief from a bottomless pit into a process of growth and awakening? The answer lies in understanding grief as a process of inner transformation, a journey that doesn't just plunge us into pain, but also reveals truths we would otherwise continue to ignore. Because even when it feels like the world has stopped, something within us keeps moving, and that changes everything. Grief is a storm, a chaotic process where we drown, we resist, and eventually we learn to float. But the hardest truth to accept is that there are no shortcuts. We cannot bypass the pain. We cannot pretend it isn't there. Carl Jung knew that when someone we love dies, it doesn't just take their presence away. It forces us to confront a brutal mirror, the mirror of our own psyche. Every stage of grief is a door. Each one pushes us to look inward. Each one drags us, whether we like it or not, into a deeper part of ourselves. It all begins with denial. That first moment when we say to ourselves, "This can't be happening. It's not real." But what are we really denying? When Jung spoke of the shadow, he referred to those parts of ourselves we hide, parts we don't want to see. In denial, the shadow becomes a shelter. We convince ourselves everything is the same. We cling to routine as if nothing has changed. But deep down, we know something inside us already has. In denial, we bury fear, guilt, and the deepest sadness. We believe that if we don't look at it, it'll go away. But all we really do is push the pain further down until it eventually erupts. Then comes anger. When denial can no longer hold us together, rage surfaces. We lash out at ourselves, at others, at God, at the universe. We look for someone to blame. We ask, why did this happen? Why me? Jung explained that many of our unresolved emotions get projected onto the outside world. It's not that we truly hate others. It's that the pain is too much to carry alone. Sometimes, anger turns into resentment. Other times, into self-destruction. But beneath all rage is a truth we are afraid to face. What we really feel is fear. Because when the anger fades, what's left? The mind's next attempt to escape reality is bargaining. The ego, desperate to regain control, starts looking for impossible solutions. If I had done something different, this wouldn't have happened. If I try hard enough, maybe the pain will go away. We cling to the belief that somehow we can undo the inevitable. But deep down, we know this stage is only a pause before the final blow. And when bargaining fails, the truth strikes fully. That's when the deepest sadness appears. In this phase, all the noise vanishes. There's no more struggle, no more justifications, only a vast, overwhelming emptiness. But contrary to what many believe, depression during grief is not an illness. It's a bridge, an invitation to the deepest parts of our psyche. Carl Jung often spoke about the importance of confronting our darkness, of daring to dive deep into the unconscious without fear. According to him, it's only in that depth, away from the noise of the surface, where we can truly find the answers we're seeking. It's in that hidden realm where transformation becomes possible. This is precisely where grief becomes more than just pain. It becomes a portal to something greater. When we stop running from the sadness, when we stop resisting, and instead allow ourselves to feel everything without judgment or struggle, something inside us begins to shift. This isn't resignation. It's not about forgetting. It's not about letting go in the way people often imagine. No, this is a rebirth. Reaching the final stage of grief doesn't mean the pain goes away. It doesn't mean we're suddenly whole again, or that the wound magically disappears. What it truly means is that we learn how to live with that pain. We stop fighting it. We learn to walk with it, hand in hand. Acceptance is not about erasing what happened. It's not about replacing what was lost. It's about integrating it, making it part of who we are. Jung said that true individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, only happens when we stop identifying with what we've lost. We begin to understand that love doesn't die with the person. It doesn't vanish. It transforms. It becomes something deeper, something that exists, not in the external world, but within us. That's the moment when we realize that life goes on, not because the loss meant nothing, but because it meant everything. Too much, in fact, to let it dissolve into despair. Clara understood this when her brother died suddenly. For months, she lived in denial, repeating to herself that he would come back, convincing herself that it had all been a mistake. Then came the anger, the fury at life, the bitterness, the screaming at the heavens. She tried to bargain with fate, pleading for a different outcome. But eventually, she fell into a deep sadness where nothing made sense anymore. The world turned grey. Time slowed down. She felt empty, hollow, and yet, in that silence, something shifted. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it was real. She began to understand that her brother hadn't truly left. He was there in every memory, in every lesson he ever taught her, in every part of herself that had been transformed by his love and presence. She never stopped missing him. She never stopped loving him. But she did learn how to move forward, carrying him not as a weight, but as a part of her. Because grief is not just about losing someone. It's about rediscovering yourself on a level you never thought possible. You cannot avoid the pain of grief. No one can. But what you can do is allow it to guide you, to become your compass through the darkness. And when you do, your life will never be the same again. Grief doesn't just take the person you love, it also confronts you with something even more terrifying: yourself. It holds up a mirror and forces you to look into the corners of your soul you've always avoided. Losing someone is like switching on a light in the darkest room of your mind. And what you find there isn't always what you expected. Carl Jung referred to it as the shadow, all those hidden parts of ourselves that we've repressed, denied, or buried over the course of our lives. These aspects of the psyche don't disappear just because we refuse to look at them. On the contrary, they wait silently in the background, shaping our behavior, our relationships, and the way we interpret the world. The shadow contains our deepest fears, our most unspoken insecurities, our unresolved guilt, and the silent griefs we never allowed ourselves to feel. And one of the most powerful catalysts that can bring all of this to the surface is grief. Grief has a strange and mysterious power. It doesn't simply overwhelm us with sadness over what we've lost. It cracks open something much deeper. Suddenly, we're not just mourning a person. We're confronting the fear of being left alone, the regret over words left unspoken, the helpless feeling that maybe, just maybe, we could have done something differently. It's not just about what's gone. It's about what lingers, what remains inside us, like a haunting echo. When someone dies, a part of us dies too. But it's not just about the departure of the other. It's about the confrontation with the parts of ourselves that have been quietly asleep, or worse, deliberately ignored. Grief reveals what was hidden: the fear of loneliness, the fear of not being enough, the fear that life may never feel the same again. It reawakens the guilt for the things we didn't say, the chances we didn't take, the time we wasted thinking there would always be more. Suddenly, time stops being infinite. Suddenly, we realize that it slips through our fingers without warning. And in that stillness, we begin to ask the most human question of all: what if? But here's something very few people truly understand. Those feelings of guilt and fear don't emerge to torment us. They were always there. They simply lived hidden, buried under our daily routines, disguised by distractions, camouflaged beneath the noise of everyday life. Grief doesn't invent new pain. It simply strips away the illusions and forces us to look at the pain that has always been there, waiting. Anna lived this truth in the most intimate way. When her mother passed away, she felt something inside her shatter. She expected the sadness. She even expected the tears. What she didn't expect was the emotional tsunami that followed. The anger, the shame, the guilt, the unbearable weight of everything she had kept locked away for so long. For years, she had avoided confronting the complicated relationship she had with her mother. There were things left unsaid, grudges never resolved, wounds never healed. And now, in the silence left by her absence, all of it surfaced like a tidal wave. She found herself trapped, not just in mourning for her mother, but in mourning for all the parts of herself that she had repressed. That is the true depth of grief. It's not only about what you lost, it's about what you were never brave enough to face. It's about who you were before and who you must become after. It's uncomfortable, it's painful, but it's also an opportunity. Because when we dare to look within, when we choose to stop running and instead embrace the shadow, we begin to change. Something within us begins to shift, not temporarily, but permanently. Grief, if we allow it, can become more than a goodbye. It can be a homecoming, a return to the most honest and authentic version of who we are. The pain of loss can feel like a bottomless pit, a void that no amount of distraction, time, or advice can ever seem to fill. But what if that very pain could become something more? Carl Jung didn't see suffering as a dead end. He saw it as a sacred process of transformation. Every grief is, in its own way, a psychological initiation. It's not just about letting go of the one who has passed. It's about encountering a new version of yourself, one who has walked through the fire and emerged changed. When someone we love is no longer with us, the world doesn't just change on the outside, it changes on the inside. And this is where many people get stuck, clinging to what was, resisting the flow of transformation, holding tightly to an identity that no longer fits. But Jung taught that pain can be alchemy. Pain can be the raw material for rebirth. The problem is that most of us have been taught to avoid suffering at all costs. We are told to get over it, to move on, to stay strong. But grief is not something you get over. It is something you integrate. And to integrate it, you must move through it with awareness, not avoiding it, not repressing it, but feeling it, understanding it, and allowing it to transform you. There are powerful ways to do this. One of them is symbolic writing. Take a blank sheet of paper and write a letter to the person you lost. Say everything you never said. Express, without fear, what your heart is still holding. Sometimes, what hurts the most is not just their absence, but the silence left by the words we never dared to speak while they were alive. Another powerful tool is active visualization. Carl Jung used it as a way to communicate with his unconscious, allowing the mind to create images and dialogues that revealed what truly needed to be healed. To close your eyes, imagine the person you've lost, speak to them, and listen to what their presence has to tell you. This, too, is a form of healing. And then there are personal rituals, not necessarily religious, but deeply symbolic acts that help us give the loss a rightful place in the story of our lives. It could be something as simple as lighting a candle every day in their honor, visiting a place that held meaning for you both, or creating a space of remembrance that connects you with everything they represented to you. The goal is not to forget. The goal is to transform the pain into something that helps you grow. because deep sorrow, too, can be the seed of an inner rebirth. When we stop seeing grief as an enemy and begin to understand it as a teacher, something profound is revealed. What we've lost in the physical world remains alive in our psyche, in our thoughts, in our memories, in the imprints left on our lives. It's not an easy path, but those who dare to walk it are never the same again. When someone we love leaves, we feel as if their absence consumes everything. We believe the emptiness will last forever and that we will never feel whole again. But grief, like every deep process of the psyche, is not just an end. It's also a threshold, a portal to something else. Carl Jung spoke of a fascinating phenomenon called synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem far too perfect to be random. After a great loss, many people begin to notice these signs: a song that plays at just the right moment, a dream that reveals a hidden truth, an object that appears just when you needed it most. From the perspective of depth psychology, these are not just emotional comforts. They are manifestations of the unconscious, guiding us, reminding us that what we have lost has not entirely disappeared. The person we loved continues to live within us, not in a literal sense, but in a way that is even more powerful. In how they transformed us, in the way their existence helped shape who we are now. Their voice, their gestures, their lessons, everything remains inscribed within us. Life after loss is not about forgetting, it's about integrating, it's about evolving. Martin understood this deeply. He was a man who lost his wife after 20 years of marriage. For months, the pain was unbearable. He felt his life had lost all meaning without her. Then one day, he found an old notebook she used to write in, filled with reflections, thoughts, and quotes about life. In those pages, he discovered a sentence that changed everything. "If I ever leave before you, I want you to keep loving life for the both of us." That moment marked a turning point. He realized that his grief didn't have to be a life sentence of sorrow. It could be an invitation to honor her memory through his own existence. From then on, Martin devoted himself to helping others going through the same pain, turning his loss into a new purpose, a deeper way of living. Every loss leaves us with a fundamental question: what emotional legacy did that person leave in my life? A powerful way to gain clarity is to pause and reflect. What did they teach me that I never valued before? How did they change my view of the world? What values or ideals can I continue to honor in their name? Because the true presence of a person doesn't lie in their physical body, but in the transformation they sparked within us. And when we understand this, truly understand it, we realize that loss doesn't destroy us. It rebuilds us in ways we never imagined possible. Losing someone you love is one of life's greatest trials. It breaks you. It steals your breath. It leaves you wondering whether you'll ever feel whole again. But there's something we're rarely told. The pain of grief doesn't just take something from us. It also gives us something new. It's a cruel paradox, and yet a beautiful one. Because although the emptiness is real, and although the absence weighs heavily, within that same pain lies a seed of transformation. Something in us changes forever. We become a new version of ourselves, shaped by the loss, but also enriched by everything that person meant to us. Death is not just an ending, it's also a beginning. Jung understood that everything within the psyche is part of an evolutionary process. Nothing dies without leaving a trace. Nothing disappears without first transforming us. And grief, though often walked in solitude, is also a bridge toward a deeper understanding of life itself. And if these words resonated with you, if at any point you felt like we were telling your story, then maybe this message didn't reach you by accident. Maybe this was the exact moment you needed to be reminded that even in the depths of pain, you still have the power to transform your life. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means loving again, trusting again, living again, more deeply, more consciously, with more heart. If this video touched your soul, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss any content that can support you on this journey of inner growth. And please, share this video with someone who truly needs it. You never know how much of a difference a single message can make when it arrives at the right time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing yourself to feel. And most of all, thank you for continuing. Have you ever felt like no one truly understands you? You try to explain yourself, to express what's inside you, hoping someone will finally hear you. But the words seem to vanish into thin air, like you're screaming into an empty room. You might be in a relationship where you give your all, where you show up, where you try to be seen, yet something keeps missing. Or perhaps at work, with friends, even with family, you feel an invisible wall separating who you truly are from how others perceive you. If any of this resonates with you, stay with me. You're not alone. And what you're about to discover could change everything. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul, would tell you that this emptiness you feel isn't a punishment. It's not bad luck or something broken inside you. It's a sign, a powerful, urgent invitation from your inner world, asking you to listen more closely, to listen not to the noise of the world, but to the whisper of your own essence. Today, let's go deep into his wisdom to understand why, when the world seems to misunderstand you, the answer isn't out there, it's within you. Jung believed that each of us carries an entire universe inside, a vast, mysterious realm he called the unconscious. It's not just a place where forgotten memories are stored. No, it's a living force, rich with symbols, intuition, emotion, and ancient truths. It speaks a language that isn't made of words, but of images, sensations, and moments that stir your gut. Imagine your mind as an ocean. On the surface, you see the waves, the part of you that handles daily tasks, makes decisions, holds conversations, the conscious mind. But beneath that surface lies an enormous depth, strong currents you cannot see, yet they influence everything. Those deep currents are your unconscious. And according to Jung, when you feel misunderstood, it's often because those inner forces are trying to send a message, and without realizing it, you've been ignoring them. Think about it. How many times have you felt a knot in your stomach before making a choice, but you went ahead anyway because it seemed logical, responsible, or expected? Maybe you accepted a job that didn't fulfill you just because it offered security, or you stayed in a friendship that drained you because you didn't want to disappoint anyone. That inner discomfort, that subtle warning, isn't random. Jung would call it the voice of the unconscious, a deeper part of you that often knows what your conscious mind refuses to admit. And when you don't listen to it, the outside world starts to mirror that internal disconnect. Miscommunications, feeling out of place, the sensation of drifting, even when everything looks fine on the surface. That's when you begin to feel lost in plain sight, smiling while silently unraveling inside. This leads us to a profound insight from Jung. Your external reality is nothing more than a reflection of your internal world. If you feel like no one sees you, it may be because you've lost touch with the truest parts of yourself. But let's be clear, this isn't your fault. We live in a world that pushes us to perform, to please, to adapt. From a young age, especially as women, we're taught to be quiet, to be good, to prioritize others' needs above our own. So we begin to disconnect from our essence. We silence our desires. We hide our truth. But Jung invites us to do something radical, to stop, to listen. Because deep inside you, there's a voice that doesn't need anyone's permission to speak, a truth that is already whole, a self that has been waiting, not to be fixed, but to be remembered. Let's pause here for a moment. Breathe deeply. Bring to your mind a time in your life when you felt completely unseen. Maybe you were trying to explain your feelings, and no one seemed to understand. Maybe you were surrounded by people, but felt utterly alone. Who were you with? Where were you? What were you trying to say? That memory isn't random. According to Jung, the unconscious speaks through these moments. And to reconnect with yourself, you have to start paying attention to what they're trying to reveal. One of the most important tools Jung gave us to do this is what he called the shadow. It's one of the most powerful and misunderstood ideas in psychology. The shadow is everything you've hidden from yourself, not because it's evil, but because it didn't fit the image of who you thought you should be. Maybe you're the kind of person who always says yes, even when you want to scream no. Or maybe you've learned to suppress your anger because you were taught that being angry makes you unlovable or too much. Those parts of you don't disappear. They don't go away just because you push them down. They become your shadow, and the more you ignore it, the more power it gains over your life. Your shadow starts to shape your relationships. It affects your choices. It even influences the way you speak to yourself. You might hear it in your inner critic, in your doubts, in the way you constantly minimize your own needs. And yet, there's a strange beauty here. Your shadow doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to be seen. Because inside your most rejected parts lies your greatest strength. So what can you do? Begin by witnessing yourself with honesty. Not judgment, not shame. Take a notebook. Write down the moment that came to your mind earlier, the one where you felt invisible. Don't try to analyze it. Don't filter it. Just write what you felt. This simple act is powerful. It's the first step toward bringing light to what was hidden. Jung believed that healing doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from embracing your wholeness, both the light and the dark, the parts that shine and the parts you are told to hide. Because the truth is, you are not broken. You are not too much. You are not invisible. You are a deep, living mystery, full of contradictions, emotions, and beauty. The emptiness you feel is not a void. It's space, sacred space, waiting for you to fill it with your truth. And once you begin to reconnect with that truth, the world begins to change. Not because the people around you suddenly become different, but because you are no longer abandoning yourself. You begin to speak from a deeper place. You start choosing what aligns with your soul. And people feel that, even if they can't explain it. It's not about being understood by everyone. It's about understanding yourself so deeply that external validation is no longer a necessity. It becomes a bonus. There are moments in life when you feel misunderstood, invisible, like your thoughts don't matter, like your voice is echoing in an empty room. You try to express yourself, to be heard, to be seen, but something in the air feels off. You begin to wonder, why can't they understand me? Why do I feel so out of place, even among the people I care about? According to Carl Jung, this experience isn't random. It isn't bad luck or simply the result of poor communication. It's a sign from your unconscious. That silent and powerful force within you is trying to speak, but not with words. It speaks through discomfort, through irritation, through emotions that catch you off guard. When you feel defensive, hurt, angry, or unseen, you are often not reacting to the world itself. You are reacting to a part of yourself you've buried. Jung called this the shadow, those forgotten, suppressed, or rejected aspects of who you are. And when no one seems to understand you, it's often because you have forgotten to understand yourself. Maybe you've locked away your desire to explore the world freely. Maybe you've silenced your inner voice that wants to say no more often, that wants to protect your boundaries. Maybe you've denied your creativity, your spontaneity, your longing for more. The shadow is not something evil or dangerous. It is not your enemy. It is a neglected friend, a part of your soul, knocking from the inside, asking to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be reintegrated into your life. When no one gets you, it's not always because they're unwilling to understand. Sometimes it's because your own shadow is screaming for your attention. You're projecting your inner battle onto the outer world, hoping someone will finally see the part of you that you won't look at. So where do we start? How do we respond to this call? First, observe your emotions closely. When someone's words shake you, when you feel dismissed or devalued, pause. Don't just react. Ask yourself, what is this situation revealing about me? What emotion is this stirring? What old wound is being touched? This is the first key, inner awareness. If someone's criticism fills you with rage, don't focus solely on what they said. Ask instead, why does this make me feel so small? What part of me feels threatened or disrespected? If someone ignores you, consider that perhaps you've been ignoring your own needs, your own truth. The world reflects what's happening inside you. This is not magic. It's deep psychology. Jung called it projection. We see in others the parts of ourselves we refuse to see in the mirror. That's why someone else's behavior can trigger such an intense emotional response. It's not just about them. It's about you. It's about what you've denied, buried, or tried to forget. Let's pause for a moment. Think about a person in your life who often makes you feel misunderstood. Don't judge them. Don't analyze them. Simply observe. What is it about their presence, their behavior, their words that unsettles you? Now ask yourself, what part of me feels ignored here? What truth of mine is being overlooked? These small questions open doors. They begin a conversation with your unconscious, a conversation you've needed for a long time. And once you begin to listen, something shifts. Everything begins to change. Why is this so important? Because your energy is sacred. Your vitality, your life force, what Jung described as the deep spark that moves you, is intimately tied to your inner world. When you live disconnected from yourself, when you suppress your emotions, your needs, your creativity, your energy doesn't disappear. It simply leaks. It drains away. You give it to roles, to expectations, to the needs of others. And one day, you wake up exhausted, hollow, unsure of who you really are. This happens slowly, often unnoticed, until you feel like a ghost in your own life. And Jung would say, this is not a crisis. This is a turning point. Because when the self forgets itself, the unconscious begins to make noise. That noise can sound like sadness, like frustration, like burnout, like the painful thought that no one really gets you. But underneath that is a message. It's time to return home to yourself. If you're still here, if you're still listening, it's because something within you is waking up. A quiet knowing. A sense that there's more to your life than what you've been told. That you are not meant to just exist. You are meant to be. To live from a place of wholeness. And that wholeness begins when you stop fighting your shadow and start listening to it. So what can you do now? Begin by writing down your emotional triggers. Reflect on the people who make you feel small, unimportant, or unseen. Not to blame them, but to see yourself in the interaction. What is being mirrored back to you? Where have you abandoned yourself? Where are you still trying to gain the approval of others instead of giving it to yourself? This is deep work. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. Because as Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your healing doesn't come from pretending everything is okay. It comes from turning toward what hurts and asking it what it needs. This is not about blaming yourself either. It's about reclaiming yourself, reconnecting with the parts you exiled long ago because you thought they were too much, too wild, too emotional, too inconvenient. But those parts are you, and they hold the key to your freedom. If no one understands you, then maybe it's time you understand yourself. More fully, more honestly, more deeply than ever before. Your unconscious isn't trying to punish you. It's trying to guide you back to your truth. And if you listen, truly listen, you'll discover that the person you've been waiting for all along isn't out there. It's you, the real you, the whole you. And that changes everything. And now, let's take it one step further. Let's face what Jung called the shadow. That part of you you've hidden, but that has the power to set you free if you're willing to listen. Picture this. You're at a gathering with friends. Everyone's laughing, planning a trip, but you feel out of place. You try to speak, but no one really seems to hear you. You fall silent, frustrated. Then you ask yourself, what's wrong with me? Jung would say, it's not just about this moment. It's your shadow, whispering something to you. The shadow is like the basement of your mind, where you've stored everything you don't want to show. Your fears, your wildest desires, the parts of you that don't match what others expect. And often, when no one understands you, it's because that shadow is trying to come out. Think about it this way. Someone who's always been the perfect friend, always listening, always giving, never asking, suddenly explodes during an argument, says things they never thought they would, then feels guilty. Who am I to get this angry, they wonder. But Jung would say it's not a mistake. It's the shadow breaking through, the part of you that wanted to be seen, that's tired of staying quiet. It had been knocking for years, and when you ignore it, it doesn't disappear. It shows up as anger, sadness, or that deep emptiness you feel when no one seems to get you. So what do we do with the shadow? Jung doesn't say to eliminate it, he says to integrate it. Integration doesn't mean letting it control you. It means looking at it with curiosity and asking, what is this trying to teach me? For example, if you feel your partner doesn't understand you, say during constant arguments where they dismiss your stress, it might actually be your shadow, revealing that you haven't given yourself permission to rest. The shadow isn't a monster, it's a mirror. And when you face it, you start to understand why you feel so disconnected. Let's pause for a second. Breathe. Think of a moment when you snapped or felt totally out of control. What happened? What did you say or do that even surprised you? Don't judge, just observe. Then, write in the journal I suggested earlier. What part of me was asking for attention in that moment? This is real. This is practical. And it's the beginning of something powerful. Jung said, "The shadow doesn't disappear through force. It transforms through attention." Now here's something that might change your perspective completely. The people who make you feel misunderstood, they're not the real problem. They're messengers. Jung called this projection. It means that what bothers you in someone else is often something you haven't yet accepted in yourself. Think about someone who constantly criticizes you for being too serious. You feel misunderstood, even hurt. But then, reflecting one day, you realize you judge yourself for not being more relaxed. That person was simply reflecting your inner conflict. Has this ever happened to you? Someone gets under your skin, and later you see they were showing you something you carry too. It's not easy to accept, but it's freeing. Because if the problem is in you, so is the solution. Jung reminds us, we can't change others, but we can change how we see ourselves. And when that happens, something magical occurs. Relationships shift. People who once didn't understand you start to see you differently, or they drift away because they no longer match your new energy. It's like pruning a tree. You cut off the dead branches so it can grow stronger. Let's talk about relationships for a moment, because this is where we most often feel that sense of no one gets me. Imagine being with someone who seems perfect, kind, hardworking, fun. But every time you try to talk about your dreams, starting a business, traveling, they change the subject. You feel frustrated, alone, even when you're not physically alone. Jung would say, this isn't just about the other person. It's a sign. Maybe you've been ignoring your own voice, the one telling you to go after what you love. And your partner, without knowing it, reflects that disconnection. Sound familiar? Is there someone in your life who makes you feel this way? So, what now? Jung invites us to let go, not give up, but release what isn't aligned with your true self. Letting go isn't easy. It takes time to admit something is draining your light. But when you do, something shifts. You start pursuing your dreams. You meet people who actually support you, and your energy returns. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, without the masks. And it begins the moment you dare to listen to your truth, even if it hurts. Now let's talk about something practical. How to protect your energy. Because when no one seems to understand you, it's often because you're giving too much of yourself to those who don't value it. Jung believed our energy is like a river. If you let it flow where it's not appreciated, you eventually dry up. Think of someone who was always available to others, always showing up, yet never received the same in return. One day they said, enough, set boundaries, and although it felt uncomfortable at first, they began to feel more alive. Protecting your energy is not selfish, it's survival, and it begins with a no, when your inner voice asks for it. Here's something concrete. This week, identify a situation where you're giving more than you're receiving. Maybe it's a never-ending conversation that drains you, or a favor that feels too heavy. Practice saying no, or set a small boundary. Then notice how it makes you feel. Jung would say that act strengthens yourself, the central part of you that knows exactly what you deserve. And when you listen to it, the world starts to respond differently. Before we continue, do something for this community. Share this video with someone who needs a little push to hear their own voice again. Leave a comment. What boundary will you set this week? Or how is this message resonating with you. Every time you share or interact, you help this message reach others who truly need it. So far, we've seen how the shadow and projections show us what we need to work on. But what happens when you really begin to listen? When you dare to let go and live from your true self? That's what we'll explore now. Get ready, because we're about to discover how Jung's idea of synchronicity comes into play, and how the universe begins to align when you align with yourself. We're nearing the end, and if you're still here, it means you're ready to take a big leap. We've explored how the unconscious speaks when you feel misunderstood, how your shadow demands attention, and how relationships reflect what's inside you. Now let's close this circle with something Jung loved: the idea that when you truly listen to yourself, the universe responds. This isn't flowery poetry, it's a real experience you can have. And today, I'll show you how. Imagine you choose to let go of something that weighs you down. Maybe it's a connection that dims your light. One day, you follow your intuition and stop engaging. At first, guilt shows up. But then, something surprising happens. You meet someone or experience something that reignites a forgotten passion. Jung would call that synchronicity. Those events that seem like coincidence, but are really the universe aligning with your truth. Have you lived something like that? A moment when everything clicked the second you listened to yourself? Synchronicity is not fairy tale magic. It's a sign that you're in contact with your true self, that deep center Jung described as the core of who you are. And when you live from that place, life starts to flow. But getting there requires courage. Letting go isn't easy. Think for a moment, what's something you're afraid to release? A habit? A person? A fear? What would happen if you let it go? Imagine your life without that weight. Write that down. Jung used to say the void left behind when you let go is not something to fear. It's sacred space where new things can grow. And believe me, when you do, everything changes. So how do we live this day by day? Jung left us a clear guide. Listen within, face your shadows, and act from your truth. It's not about perfection, it's about honesty. If you feel like no one in your life understands you, start by asking, what part of me am I hiding? When you uncover that part and allow it to breathe, not only do you feel more alive, those around you may surprise you. Authenticity opens doors. Here's a practical action. This week, do something that connects you with your essence. It can be something small, like dancing alone in your room, or something bold, like telling someone what you really feel. Pay attention to how you feel afterward. Jung would say that strengthens your individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, without masks. And when you do that, you naturally attract the right people, those who understand you, because you've begun to understand yourself. Let's talk about self-love, because this is the heart of it all. Jung believed you can't expect the world to see you if you don't see yourself first. If you've spent years in spaces where you felt invisible, start by writing down what you love about yourself, your laughter, your strength, your curiosity. When you stop needing others to validate you, guess what happens? You begin attracting people who value you for being exactly who you are. That's the power of listening to yourself. You become a magnet for what you truly deserve. Pause again. Reflect. What do you love about yourself that you've forgotten to celebrate? Write down 3 things right now. Maybe it's your patience, your sense of humor, or the way you care for others. Jung would say, honoring that is the first step for the world to honor it too. And if this is resonating, Share this video with someone who needs the reminder. Comment those 3 things below. I can't wait to read them, and others will be inspired too. Let's close with something powerful. Jung taught us that life isn't about fitting in or being perfect. It's about discovering who you are and living from that place. When no one understands you, it's a sign. It's time to listen to yourself more deeply. Don't look outside for what you already hold inside. Every time you feel that emptiness, that disconnect, it's your unconscious whispering, "I'm here. Look at me." And when you do, chaos turns into clarity, fear becomes strength, and loneliness becomes connection. Here's the quick summary. The world reflects you. If you feel misunderstood, begin by understanding yourself. Listen to your intuition. Face your shadow. Let go of what no longer serves you. Live your truth. The universe always responds. And the message I want you to take with you is this: you're not alone in this. You are enough. And within you lives a power that can transform everything. So today, choose to listen to yourself. Because when you do, you don't just change your life, you inspire others to change theirs. Before you leave, share this video with someone who needs that extra push. Drop a comment below. What are you taking from this? Or what will you let go of this week? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Because this is just the beginning. Together, we can spread this message to thousands, even millions. Imagine how many lives could change if we all dared to truly listen to ourselves. Are you in? Thank you for being here, for listening, for being part of this community. You are brave, you are real, and the world needs more people like you. See you in the next video. Remember, the change begins with you. True awakening wasn't about fun, but about walking straight through darkness. There is no coming to pain. Because before you can really are, everything must begin to collapse. Won't offer you comfort to soothe your mind. It's an invitation shadow to fade running from, no matter how loud, because only the quiet of the soul begin. It's a spiritual awakening for answers, peace, or Often, it begins from the depths of your being that words cannot. Restlessness that but from somewhere old, sacred, always come gently. Earthquake, shake identity, pulling everything familiar. Survive this process. The body, but because constructed identity, every mask imperfecting, so carefully built, the labels they wore apart in the face powerful and untruth. And when retreat, they turn to the illusion, because the truth, unpolished, it comes to break the illusions you clung to, depended on, the second skin. It tears away the safety nets, the borrowed beliefs, and you mistook for your own. The part no one talks left out of the sugar about enlightenment. Beneath the silence, the soul realizes that the world stopped making sense. Awakening was light, journey. The other in shadow. Told the world, not in a literal existential one. Things start to crumble. If you once believed in, your gods, your beliefs, all this become hollow echoes. You no longer know how to live what Jung meant. There is pain. Because of wrapped in peace, in crisis, guilt starts to feel not a cruel lie, a scaffolding that once you weren't yet ready to. Now you are. Some ancient part of you is untamed, sacred, uses to fall back as no longer unsee. The dreams you chase belong to someone else. It's felt like home now, as if you've drifted to a different. The pleasures that used to dust as silence, and it drowns used to call me of the ego. It is a real psychological death of, and if you resist it, dies. If you fight madness, and even it will still tear you open. Tearing, you catch a goal. That's why back. Because the doesn't die quietly. It bargains for survival. It depression that you're broken. And because the map you were given lead you back to yourself to succeed. But no one taught, no one showed you, no one prepared you to listen to the whisper of the dusk. So yes, like destruction, it's a sacred invitation into your asked to let go. It's not real. A mask. Every idea truly yours. You will lose people, yourself, you once, and you will have, because if you cling to them into the new frequency in your hands, doesn't offer you a life. It burns that, and then to see if something is to rise from what people turn back. The truth. Applause, the familiar cage, because the one is terrifying. Rational mind can't asks you to feel. Hold your gaze steady. Parts you tried reveals your shadow, but as a part of you, aching for home, and quietly. There are inner not obey language, urgency of the soul, to the part of you that learned to control without love. Same part is where you're now. It are to be recognized does not mean running away. On the contrary, to sit beside you, in the eyes, even when it speaks through silence, through shadow, doesn't speak, expresses itself through pain, through compulsive instincts, the very things sacred. It lives in your addictions, in yourself, and as a way to pretend you will remain trapped endlessly in the same relationships. What most people is that awakening is not, it is the conscious being it, truly for honesty, with your soul stripped bare. By very few ever truly, because awakening doesn't. It demands your grief, your violence. It requires reborn with no certainty on the other side, while still breathing, in order to watch the scaffolding of you and still say, and in that yes, this descent doesn't require, it requires your surrender. Defies the ego most, was built to control what you feel. The story you tell yourself, world that punishes, but your soul did not survive. It came, and every true transpires a breaking down. Unravel the structures that once told me. Only then emerge. Not but something born, in essence, doesn't shout. It waits. Silently. For the masks to fall away, to exhaust itself. Then, whispers. Not in word, unmistakable yearning for something more. Not more approval. More honest. And that longing, don't label it or dysfunction. It is the sacred signal to leave the lie behind. Lies. Most people hear that call. Nothing's happening. Achievements. They drown. They numb it. Because answering that call, world you built on, someone warns you just how low depth can be. Is not beauty. Exile from your socially accepted. Exile from the system of valid. Even realize you depend on that exile. You'll miss the numbness, the comfort of, but something inside you, because once you've seen the truth, unsee it. Your soul, you can surface. So you begin through sleepless nights, stained with tears, through relationships, even if you're not broken, the in-between you once were, and the cocoon, the liminal zone where the new hasn't taken root, terrifying place. And it is there that your deepest work steps in closer, with being ignored. Every reaction is from the depths, like a going across the years. Sit without judgment, with surrender, not from authenticity, but from truth. To run. Of course, taught to escape pain, to spiritualize it, with affirmations, but awakening, it is confrontation. Into the mirror of your, and refusing to look, not being asked to avoid, being asked to feel it, to let it move, it show you what comes, and slowly, you begin to realize that pain, it was the door, armor, the fracture finally pour in, that anger, fear, they were hidden messaging a piece of your truth, something softened, something ancient, feel what you maybe haven't felt in perhaps ever, just for others, but the child you once were, the way they needed, who built armor, for the adult, for purpose, of it, without judgments, with awe, that can only rise of self-abandonment. Grace, everything. You no longer need to heal in because you find are beneath it all. Changes begin to understand grace toward a better return to honor with the chaos. Paradox of being human, afraid, eternal, limitless, and wounded. That honesty becomes the ground stand, not from certainty, but no longer need to convince anyone. You no longer dim your light, sacrifice your truth, because now that safe place, everything out, but be yourself in the very at the most. And that changes everything. Very few people achieve weak, but because to stay with the with their soul, spirit. But you, and because you stay, not polished, grounded, aligned, and that is the beginning. You begin to realize built on borrowed dreams, chosen by fear. Never knew what only knew what survival demands that you ask, trade your soul, bury your need, your hunger behind a smile, the eyes. But your awakening comes a sacred, deep, thunderous against the lies you played, against self, just to be rage is not a regression. It's the purpose. I was never born. You begin to speak louder, but with more clarity. No, without guilt, without needing to explain. Apologizing for being hurt, doesn't know what to do. It trained you to obey, to dilute acceptable. But now, see, it cannot predict, cannot distort the unconscious in others. It's not about boasting about healing, breathing it, every moment, without reserve. It's not glamorous, it's poetic. Looks like crying alone in your nervous system. Rerun times, it looks like it would be forever. Came too loud for their other times. It looks like built with love. You no longer are. Of becoming. You lose identity. What held you up, holds you back. Isn't immediate. It's a void where the old and the new has not. You wake up and don't you walk through the world and newly born. Words. But language for to plan. But because this space, it's for listening. Beneath the noise, let go. Let go of the time of the need to understand this shape you, strip you what remains when act. And what it is not your performance, not the pod-like armor. What presence of being alive. And in that space, if you hope to become, always been waiting. The wounded one. Why you came before the world. You no longer, you embody in every word that leans into soft and you calls for no longer seek meaning. You live it as of loving, of when everything goes dark, the deepest phase of awakening. No one prepares you for secret, but because it can only be lived, a nation or a peak, return, a remember behind the shadow, the mold, the self, and when you begin to live, just visit it, but true. Everything changes, or dramatically, undeniable, yet more fulfilling. Explaining yourself to those, and you stop handing over to experts or system, praying your inner knowing, and then something you no longer chase. You realize you always were, not in someone else, waiting in a future moment. Now, begin to trust that a truth will unfold. Whatever falls away, and whatever remains, frequency. Yes. No longer fear the unknown. The unknown feels not because it's become predictable. Mystery lives one that rises and having made it through, that screams or seeks. It doesn't shine the way the worth. It is it's the remembered who they are, because that wasn't real, unbreakable, not but because it already happened with a deeper truth through life, looking for. You walk as others. But for your private part of you, to reclaim your to walk alone, just to feel real again, isn't built overnight. In fire, in those nights, and now no longer the goal, only truth. Now, not because it's because you no longer spend energy someone you're not. Bonds from fear. You no longer sell your time. You no longer diluted. You've come to pretend again. Exile, silence. Grace, because this stillness, this sanctuary that no one can give or take how you watch others run after meaning like shadows. Because you were there, still carry the scar as well, but one that calls. You can stop running now. You can return, and some will. What they've been dying to, and others won't. Because you know one. You only need to stay rooted, stay real. This not to fight, stop feeding it with your not to preach about change and no longer be denied. Alone becomes a mirror that flatters, but one some will shatter and will awaken. But not your job to manage, is to keep being the clarity. This is how comes power. But through presence that cannot be moved, longer live from the surface, from that self, only a the corners of your soul by habit, by pain. You remember guilt, how to feel shame, how to speak without asking for permission. You remember how to walk through the blaming yourself, because no longer a question. You no longer ask, be. Now, I already is the final threshold. Has never been about becoming you. Fully, unapologetic, and the chaotic, and the shattered pieces, and the open wound still bleeding, and the first beginning to bloom. And finally, everything is exiled. You're no longer trying. You're not running away. You're here to inhabit, with eyes wide, not bare, your soul brave. Survived the spiritual because you mastered it. Above it like some untouchable. Remember, you survived. You didn't transcend. You remained out the fire to burn through, but again and again stood your ground, emptied you, identities, beliefs, and in the root you were born. You didn't become self. You became, and that is a fun. Now, something implodes, a frequent knowing, a line, but simply is performance, its presence, and you walk without seeking the next peak, the next cosmic answer, awakening. Who has already awakened? Very few ever, as they are incapable. Too soon. They feel the fire, and you didn't. You didn't inward. You walked, you faced the shadows, the echoes, and the silence. That journey inward did. You found home yourself. So through life chasing something. Radiate. You don't need one. You move, you are being. Others feel somewhat through your words, but simply they feel that that only emanates from somewhere, and chose to stay. That sacred choice. If this message don't leave like nothing happened to the channel, turn and dive into the not here for surface level change. Real transformation is not for everyone. Ready to leave behind the passive, the condition, and step fully. So if you're still here, shift within you, commit to the journey. Imagine yourself walking down a mysterious path. Ahead, there's a door, a gateway to a different future, a new version of who you could become. But every time you try to move forward, something pulls you back. You look down and realize your feet are shackled, not with physical chains, but invisible ones. You want to break free, but you can't, because those chains aren't made of metal. They're made of memory, of emotion, of pain. They are the mental and emotional residue of your past. Stories you carry within, stories you didn't even realize are still writing the script of your present life. And the real question is this: are you truly living in the present, or are you just playing out the echoes of a story that ended long ago? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what happens with wounds we never truly process. We believe time has healed them, that they belong to the past. But in truth, they're still there, quiet, buried, and active. They shape how we see the world, how we trust, how we love, and even how we define ourselves. Maybe you're still carrying the fear of rejection, because once, long ago, someone made you feel like you weren't enough. Maybe trusting others is difficult, not because they've done anything wrong, but because at some point You learned that love equals pain, that people leave, that opening your heart is dangerous. Or maybe, without even realizing it, you keep repeating the same mistakes, falling into the same patterns, attracting the same conflicts, feeling stuck in a cycle you can't explain. But why does this happen? Why does the past have such a strong grip, even after so much time has passed? Because time alone doesn't heal. You can't simply bury a wound and expect it to stop bleeding. What you repress, what you ignore, what you choose not to face, those things don't vanish. They keep working beneath the surface. They operate from the shadows. They speak through your triggers, your fears, your resistance to change. Jung called it the personal unconscious, a vast archive where every significant experience is stored, especially the ones that left a deep imprint on your psyche. And if those experiences weren't fully processed, if you never gave them the attention they needed, they remain there, unchanged, unresolved, and they continue to influence your emotions, your relationships, your choices. The most dangerous part, you usually don't even realize it's happening. You don't see that you're reacting from an old wound. You don't notice that your lack of confidence, your insecurity, or your need for constant validation isn't about today. It's about yesterday. It's about what happened to you, what you were taught to believe about yourself, and what you decided the world is like based on that pain. So the real question becomes, how much of what you do today is a conscious choice? And how much of it is just a reaction, an echo of what once hurt you? If you pause and reflect, you might begin to see that many of your decisions haven't really been yours, that you've been running from old memories, old pain, old fears, that you've been avoiding situations not because they're unsafe now, but because once they were. And some part of you is still trying to protect yourself from a threat that no longer exists. But here's what you must understand. You can't move forward if you're still shackled to who you used to be. You can't create a new future if your past is the one holding the pen. If you truly want to change your life, you must break the invisible chains. You must take a hard, honest look at the wounds you're still carrying and how they've been shaping you. Because if you don't, if you never confront your past consciously, it will keep repeating itself in different forms, in different relationships, in different challenges, in different moments that all feel strangely familiar. And this is the turning point. Because the first step toward freedom is not forgetting what happened, it's understanding it. But how do you recognize the hidden wounds? How do you know which parts of your past are still controlling you without your awareness? That's where the true transformation begins. And what if I told you that the wounds affecting your life the most aren't the ones you remember? They're the ones you forgot. The most painful experiences don't disappear just because you don't think about them. They don't vanish because you push them away. They get buried. They hide in the deepest corners of your mind. And from there, they whisper into your thoughts, your actions, your identity. They live in your hesitation, in your fear of intimacy, in the way you hold back your truth, in the way you pretend you're fine when you're not. And unless you dig deep enough to find them, to name them, to understand how they've shaped you, they'll keep directing your life without your consent. You'll keep wondering why you're stuck, why change feels so hard, why you keep returning to the same emotional places you swore you'd never go back to. But here's the truth. The past doesn't have to define you, unless you let it. You are not broken. You are not doomed to repeat your suffering. You are capable of rewriting the story. But that story won't change unless you become the author again. So take the time. Go inward. Ask yourself the questions you've been afraid to ask. Face the memories you've buried. Heal not by forgetting, but by understanding. Because the moment you bring the unconscious into the light is the moment you take your power back. Carl Jung referred to this as the shadow. Everything we repress, everything we don't want to accept about ourselves, everything we were taught to hide. Because at some point in our lives, someone told us it was wrong, inappropriate, shameful. And so, out of fear, out of survival, or simply out of conditioning, we pushed it away. We buried it. We denied it. But the most dangerous thing about the shadow is this. Even if you can't see it, it still sees you. If you've ever asked yourself why you keep making the same mistakes, why you find yourself in the same painful relationships, why you tend to sabotage your own progress just when things seem to be going well, the answer isn't out there. It lies within you, in the wounds you never healed. Because what isn't resolved repeats itself. Think of it this way. The unconscious mind doesn't operate in linear time. It doesn't distinguish between past and present the way the conscious mind does. To your unconscious, what happened 10, 20, even 30 years ago is still happening. It's still active, still alive, still influencing your choices, your emotions, your behaviors. When events from your past leave a mark and your mind doesn't fully process them, those experiences get stored like frozen echoes in your psyche, and from there, they shape your present without you realizing it. That's why so many people run from love, not knowing that what they're really running from is a childhood wound, a memory, a fear, a moment where love once hurt them. That's why others feel like they're never enough, because deep within them still echoes the voice of someone who once made them feel worthless. That's why so many desperately seek approval, not because they're shallow or vain, but because they're still trying to fill a void that was created long ago. A hunger for validation that no amount of praise can satisfy. But here's something essential you need to understand. Remembering your past is not the same as being trapped in it. Many believe they've moved on just because they can speak about their pain without crying, or because they can mention what happened without breaking down. But the truth is, they're still reacting from that unhealed place. They're still navigating life through the lens of that pain, with fear, with anger, with insecurity, without even knowing where it all comes from. Because the past doesn't disappear just because you choose not to think about it. It doesn't dissolve when you convince yourself it no longer matters. You don't heal by forgetting. You heal by integrating. You stop being its prisoner when you stop seeing it as something that destroyed you, and begin to see it as something that shaped you. The moment you stop running from your past and begin to face it consciously, something within you begins to shift. This is where true transformation begins. The first step to freeing yourself from the grip of your past is to acknowledge how it still operates in your present. If you don't, if you keep turning a blind eye, it will continue to control you, quietly, invisibly, powerfully. So how do you identify those hidden wounds? How do you become aware of the parts of your history that are still scripting your present? That's where the real inner work begins. Look around. Pay attention to the people you attract, the situations that constantly frustrate you, the emotions that show up again and again in your life. Every experience outside of you is a mirror of something inside you. Carl Jung called this psychological projection, the human tendency to see in others what we have not yet acknowledged in ourselves. the things that irritate you most in other people, the dynamics that hurt the most in your relationships, the patterns that make you react impulsively. They don't originate from the outside world. They come from within you. Think about this. Why do some comments cut you deeper than others? Why do certain behaviors from others instantly trigger rage, fear, or sadness in you? It's not because those people have power over you. It's because they've touched a wound that was already there. Someone who was once rejected will see rejection everywhere, interpreting indifference as contempt, distance as abandonment, silence as disapproval. Someone who grew up feeling like they were never good enough will move through life feeling indebted, constantly trying to prove their worth in every interaction. But perhaps the most powerful and painful aspect of projection is this: it makes you unconsciously recreate and attract the same types of experiences over and over again. If someone once made you feel small, invisible, insignificant, there's a part of you, not consciously, but deep in the unconscious, that will gravitate towards situations or people who reinforce that story. Not because you want to suffer, but because your psyche is trying to confirm the narrative it's come to believe as truth. So if you really want to know which past wounds are still alive inside of you, don't just think back. Look around you. What situations hurt the most? Right now? What keeps triggering you emotionally in disproportionate ways? If something bothers you too much, if a situation causes more pain than seems reasonable, ask yourself, where is this really coming from? Because what hurts you today isn't the present. It's the echo of an old pain, a wound that has not yet found its resolution. And here's the key: the world will continue to reflect your inner wounds back to you until you decide to heal them. Life will keep putting mirrors in front of you until you look into them, not to judge yourself, but to finally see yourself with compassion and clarity. So how do you stop projecting? How do you become aware of these hidden parts and break the cycle? This is the beginning of deep introspection, the true journey within. The first step to liberation is not changing your environment. It's transforming your internal landscape. If you want to heal, you must stop running. One of the greatest mistakes we make is believing that pain will disappear if we ignore it long enough, that if we bury it under work, relationships, distractions, or entertainment, it will eventually fade. But pain doesn't work like that. Pain is not meant to be buried. It's meant to be acknowledged, heard, and integrated. What you silence doesn't go away. It waits. It waits for the next trigger, the next moment of vulnerability, the next opportunity to remind you that something inside still needs your attention. You cannot outrun what lives within you, but you can face it. And in doing so, you reclaim your power. Healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about bringing light to the parts of you that have been hidden in the dark. It's about embracing your wholeness, shadow and all. And as Jung himself said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the work. Not easy, not fast, but deeply, profoundly transformative. Carl Jung believed that the path of individuation, the journey toward becoming your true self, requires you to integrate every part of who you are, even the darkest ones. The shadow, the trauma, the shame, the fear. Everything you've tried to avoid is still there, waiting to be acknowledged. Because what you don't confront controls you. What you don't heal repeats itself. What you don't process stays trapped inside and continues to affect every aspect of your life. And here's the hard truth. Healing hurts. There's no shortcut, no magic pill, no way to bypass the process. The only way to free yourself from your past is to face it with awareness. But most people won't, because facing pain means feeling it again, and that terrifies them. So they bury it beneath distractions. Some avoid it through constant work, others through shallow relationships, or with substances, social media, anything that keeps them from being alone with their thoughts. The problem is, pain doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It builds. It turns into anxiety, depression, chronic dissatisfaction, a hollow emptiness that nothing seems to fill. Maybe you feel like something's missing, even if you can't name it. Maybe you experience intense emotions for no clear reason. You feel overwhelmed, like something in your life just isn't right. That's the past, still alive inside you. But there's a way out. It's simple, though not easy. You have to feel the pain. You have to let yourself remember, without filters, without judgment, without minimizing what happened to you. You have to give it room to rise to the surface. Because pain isn't the enemy. It's a signal, a sign that something inside still needs resolution. If there's one thing that can truly help in this process, it's writing. Grab a piece of paper and write about your deepest wound. No filters, no pauses, no fear. Write about the moment that still hurts. The words you never said. The feelings you never expressed. Write like no one will ever read it. If you feel rage, write it down. If sadness rises, let it out. Don't stop to think how it sounds. Don't try to make it coherent. Just let it pour out. And when you finish, read it out loud. Listen to yourself. Notice how your body reacts. Pay attention to the emotions that come up. Because in those words, there's something your unconscious has been trying to tell you for years. Don't rush to burn the page, to destroy it, to forget it. Give it space. Read it as many times as you need to until you realize those words don't hurt like they used to. Because when you do this, something shifts. The pain stops being a monster in the shadows and becomes part of your story. Something that happened, something you lived, something that shaped you, but no longer has power over you. And here's the key. Pain doesn't heal when you reject it. It heals when you accept it as part of your path. Because when you accept it, when you integrate it, when you stop fearing it, you stop being its prisoner. But there's more. Facing pain once isn't enough. If you truly want to be free, you have to break the cycle of repetition. And that's the next step. If you stop and look at your life honestly, you'll notice something unsettling. The same problems seem to happen again and again. Maybe you've had different partners, but they all ended up making you feel the same way. Abandoned, unappreciated, betrayed. Maybe no matter how hard you try, you always end up in situations where you feel like you're not enough. Or perhaps, every time you try to move forward in life, the same obstacle shows up, just in a different form. Carl Jung called this the compulsion to repeat. We keep attracting the same experiences until we finally learn the lesson we need to evolve. It's not a coincidence. It's not bad luck. It's your unconscious recreating the past, again and again, giving you opportunities to heal what's still unresolved. The problem is, most people don't see it that way. They think the world is against them, that the problem is out there, that it's others who need to change. But the truth is, what you live outside is only a reflection of what still remains unresolved inside. So how do you break the cycle? How can you stop repeating the past and begin writing a new story? The first step is to identify the pattern. If something has happened in your life again and again, it's a sign there's a lesson you haven't yet learned. But to see the pattern, you must do something very few people dare to do. Look at your past with brutal honesty. Take a piece of paper and write down all the painful experiences you've had in recent years, especially the ones that seem to repeat themselves constantly. Now look for the connecting thread. What do those situations have in common? What emotion have they triggered in you over and over again? What types of people or circumstances keep showing up in different stages of your life? When you do this, you'll realize they aren't separate experiences. They are the same story told in different ways. And here's the key. Patterns stop repeating when you finally understand the message they've been trying to show you. If you've always felt like people abandon you, the lesson might be to give yourself the love and safety you've been seeking outside. If you keep ending up in relationships where you're not valued, maybe you haven't yet learned to value yourself enough to walk away. If you feel like you're always failing at what you try, perhaps you've been acting out of fear, sabotaging your chances before they even have a chance to grow. Real freedom comes when you stop seeing these patterns as punishments and start seeing them as guides for your personal growth. You can't change the past, but you can choose not to let it control you anymore. Because once you clearly see the pattern, you can't go on repeating it unconsciously. And right there, in that moment, is when you finally begin to write a new story. If the past no longer defines you, then who are you now? When you finally break the cycle and stop reliving the same stories over and over, you step into a new reality. For the first time, you have the chance to become someone different. But here comes a crucial question. How do you rebuild yourself without the weight of the wounds that once defined you? Carl Jung spoke of psychological rebirth. According to him, when we free ourselves from the past and stop identifying with our wounds, a new version of ourselves is born, one no longer trapped in the story of suffering we used to tell. The problem is, most people don't know how to take that step. After years of carrying emotional burdens, they've grown used to seeing themselves through the lens of pain. They've lived so long defining themselves by what happened to them. They don't know who they are without it. But true transformation happens when you learn to redefine your story through the lens of growth rather than victimhood. Because what happened to you is undeniable. The wounds exist. The pain was real. But the difference lies in how you choose to interpret your past. You can see it as a tragedy that broke you, or as the trial that made you stronger. You can view it as an injustice that took something from you, or as the experience that taught you what no one else could. And this is where rebirth happens, because when you choose to see your story through the eyes of learning rather than wounding, the past stops being a chain and becomes momentum. But this isn't just a nice idea. It's something you can start to experience right now. Try a simple but powerful exercise. Visualize the version of yourself that no longer carries the weight of the past. Imagine you've already healed, that all the wounds that used to hold you back are behind you, that you no longer react out of fear, no longer live seeking validation, no longer carry resentment or guilt. Now ask yourself, how would that version of me act? How would they move through the world? How would they make decisions? How would they feel waking up each morning? Because if you can imagine it, then that version of you already exists. You just have to begin behaving like them. Don't wait for something outside of you to give you permission to be reborn. Start thinking, acting and feeling like someone who has already been set free. Because the truth is this: you are not what happened to you. You are who you choose to become starting now. And if you've made it this far, it means you're ready to take the final step, the boldest step of all. Look at yourself now. You've walked a path most don't dare to take. You've faced your past. You've identified the wounds that used to control you. You've realized that what you lived through doesn't define who you are. You've broken the cycle. But here's where many get stuck. They know they've changed, but they don't know how to live as that new version of themselves. Because true transformation doesn't happen when you understand your story. It happens when you decide what to do with it. And here lies the most powerful truth of all. Emotional freedom is real. It's not about forgetting the past. It's about redefining it, transforming it into the fuel that drives your evolution. Your past doesn't have to be a burden. It doesn't have to be a chain around your ankle or a ghost that follows you in silence, whispering doubts every time you try to take a step forward. It can be your greatest source of strength, your hidden well of power. Everything you've lived through, every heartbreak, every failure, every sleepless night where pain seemed endless, none of it was in vain. Each of those moments carries a lesson, a fragment of wisdom forged in fire. And if you choose to, you can use those fragments to build a new foundation. Not one rooted in fear, but one anchored in resilience, self-respect, and the unshakable knowing that you survived. You made it here. But here's the truth. There's a question waiting for you, and only you can answer it. If today, right now, you are completely free from the weight of your past, if guilt no longer controlled you, if shame no longer whispered in your ear, if the pain no longer defined who you are, what would you do with your life? That's not just a question. It's a doorway. You are standing at the threshold of possibility, and the only thing you need to carry through that door is the decision to begin again. Not from nothing, but from experience. Because now, finally, you have a choice. You can keep looking back. You can keep replaying those memories like broken records, hoping for different endings that will never come. Or you can take everything you've learned and turn it into something new. You can use the wisdom earned through your scars to create a future that aligns with who you truly are. Not who you were when you were wounded, but who you are now that you've survived. This is your invitation to become the version of yourself you always dreamed of, the one who lives freely, boldly, without apologies, the one who loves themselves enough to stop bleeding for people who never bothered to heal, the one who knows that transformation doesn't mean forgetting, it means integrating. It means looking your past in the eye and saying, "Thank you. You no longer control me. You shaped me, but you don't define me." And now, the rest of your life is in front of you, open, unwritten, waiting for you to decide. So the real question is no longer, what happened to me? The real question is, what am I going to do with everything I've become? Because the past, it's already done. But your future, your life, is still yours to create. And that power, that responsibility, that freedom is in your hands.